They were going to attack first. I felt strongly about that. Direct quote from President Trump on what led to war with Iran as the fallout intensifies. A rough day for DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. Tough questions about ICE tactics and TV commercials you paid for that feature, well, her. Texas, politics, and Ed O'Keefe. You cannot find a better combination platter on this, the first primary day in election season 2026. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in New York. Welcome to the Takeout. The U.S.-Israeli, or is it Israeli-U.S., we'll get to that in a minute, war with Iran continues to expand. The question a day or two ago was where missiles and drone bombardments were occurring. The better question across the Middle East today might be, where are they not? The U.S. consulate in Dubai was hit late this afternoon by an Iranian drone. The U.S. has indefinitely closed embassies in Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, and Kuwait. It also has issued depart now travel advisories in 6 countries in the region. Panicked Americans seeking to flee have, at the moment, few options. Many commercial airports in the Middle East, you see, are closed. U.S. embassies, the ones still open, can provide only limited practical advice. The State Department said it was in contact with 500 Americans in Israel trying to leave. The U.S. also said it was preparing charter and military aircraft for as many as 3,000 Americans eager to evacuate the region. Also, the U.S. military, according to President Trump, will now escort vessels carrying oil and liquefied natural gas through the Strait of Hormuz. In other words, points of vulnerability appear to be multiplying, and with them, the understandable unease among Americans seeing this war around them intensify. Now, back to a question the Trump administration, entirely on its own, injected into this war. How did it start? Meaning, who decided what, when? Here is Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio on Capitol Hill yesterday.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
We raised this assertion last night, you might remember, with former Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery. He said what all military analysts read into this conflict have said. Integration between the U.S. and Israel has been virtually lockstep, and the U.S. did not suddenly become aware of Israeli intentions and then rush to defend itself. After all, the U.S. has been assembling naval and air assets in the region for weeks to launch just this kind of coordinated air assault with Israel. Even so, Iran's foreign minister jumped on Rubio's comments, saying America leapt into a, quote, war of choice on behalf of Israel, unquote. The MAGA base, parts of it at least, took notice and have questioned Trump's judgment. It's pretty startling considering the stakes involved and the enormous risks Trump has undertaken. Today in the Oval Office, a reporter asked the president 2 simple questions. Did Israel force your hand? Did Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, quote, pull the United States into this war?
I might have forced their hand. You see, we were having negotiations with these lunatics, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. They were going to attack if we didn't do it. So if anything, I might have forced Israel's hand. But Israel was ready, and we were ready, and we've had a very, very powerful impact because virtually everything they have has been knocked out now.
The Israelis strafed Tehran again today, and reports indicate among the dead those who might have succeeded Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who was killed Saturday. According to the New York Times, by the way, CIA intelligence pinpointed Khamenei's location so Israel could launch missiles that eventually killed him. As for who may assert control of Iran now or next, Trump said today those ranks are thinning.
Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, you know, we had some in mind from that group that is dead. And now we have another group. They may be dead also, based on reports. So I guess you have a third wave coming in. Pretty soon we're not going to know anybody.
Another variable in a war that already had more than its fair share. We begin tonight with Matt Gutman in Tel Aviv. Matt?
Hey, Garrett, I'm just looking up the sky because we just saw some flashes of light. Looked like missiles coming in, and just in a few seconds you might hear some booms. But what it actually has been noticeable is the slowing pace of missile attacks on Israel. But that isn't what we've been seeing in the Gulf. And I think that's really one of the major stories here is that the Gulf states, including Kuwait, the UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they've received 1,000 of those bus-sized missiles. Sorry, my colleagues are talking about those things in the sky. 1,000. And now we're seeing that they might have to enter the fight. Just a few minutes ago, we got word from the UAE that they reserve the right to self-defense. That could mean that they could send their own warplanes to fight Iran, to join Israel and the United States. I'm not saying that's happened, but that would be obviously a major milestone. And I think what you mentioned earlier, these points of weakness, we don't know what's going to happen, and that may be Iran's strategy to try to embroil others in the region in this war. That as Israel seems to be much more confident of its position right now. They were telling me that they hope to be able to mop up Iran's or the bulk of Iran's missile launchers, their capacity to actually get missiles across to other countries or to Israel by the end of the week. They're talking about opening up the airport for some flights towards Thursday. So there is significant progress. And my understanding was from speaking with the military that this might not need to take a month. It could be much shorter than that, Garrett.
So, Matt, what you just described for us is something that is not what we're hearing in Washington, or as I'm hearing it from New York, listening to people talk in Washington. The president and the administration say weeks, long as it takes. But the Israelis, it sounds to you, feel more optimistic about the potential of bringing this, if not to a close, ramping it down in the not too distant future.
I think, Major, that they feel like they've had some very significant success here. And there's also a big question about the endgame. What is the goal? Israel says it has very clearly defined goals. I was told specifically it's not necessarily regime change. It's decapitating the ability of the regime to attack with offensive weapons towards Israel, really missiles, but also drones to some degree. So they're trying to mop that up. The question is, what are the U.S.'s goals? How far do they want to go? What happens next? Nobody quite knows that. And that has been a point of friction between Israel and the United States and the shared command post that they have here. Because if you don't know where the goal line is and you don't know how much time you have to get there, you don't know how to assign missions and how to conduct operations. And that makes things much more difficult for the people actually trying to run this war, Major.
Declaring success depends in no small part on how you define success. Matt Gutman, Tel Aviv, thank you very much. Exactly. Turn now to the White House. Chief White House correspondent Nancy Cordes. Nancy, catch us up on a busy day for the president.
Yes, the president was in the Oval Office meeting today with the German chancellor and invited the press in and took his first questions about this conflict, took a lot of them and had some really interesting and eye-opening things to say. First and foremost, Major, the president said that Israel did not force his hand in any way to take this action when he did. He said, in fact, if anything, I may have forced Israel's hand because he said that he was watching these negotiations play out between the U.S. and Iran, and he became convinced that Iran was going to attack the U.S. The problem is that appeared to contradict what his own Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, had just said on Capitol Hill the day before, when Rubio said that they were aware that the Israelis were considering launching their own unilateral strike against Iran, and that they had analysis that if that were to happen, that U.S. assets would get attacked immediately by the Iranians in retaliation. And so the decision was made to go ahead and strike right away with the Israelis and not to wait to see what happened. So it does appear that the administration is still working out some of its messaging on the timing of this war. But the president, Major, also went on to say that the worst case scenario in his view, and he was asked about this directly, what's the worst possible thing that could happen now that you have launched this war on Iran? He said the worst possible outcome is that somebody takes over, this regime collapses, who ends up being as bad as the previous person. He said, you go through this, then in 5 years you realize you put in someone who is no better. Well, that basically crystallizes the big fear among diplomatic experts for time immemorial about the risks of regime change.
Indeed, and there was intelligence presented from analysts to the president and the White House saying that that is one of the possible outcomes of regime change, meaning more hardliners taking power in Iran. Nancy Cordes, North Lawn of the White House, thank you very much. CBS News national security contributor and former CIA Deputy Assistant Director for Counterterrorism, Joe Zaks, joins me now. Joe, we've been talking about this since it began on Saturday. Your assessment of where things are.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Major, for having me on this afternoon. I think that the U.S. and its ally, Israel, are doing quite well in this current round. Obviously, the Iranian regime is presenting some defense, and that is a sign of a regime that is really in survival mode. It sees this as an existential threat, and will continue to push back. But I think that your reporter's comments about how Israel actually views the situation there, at least, as lessening in terms of the severity of Iranian attacks over the next few days is quite a powerful statement. I've seen that reporting elsewhere. And I think it's an indication that, at least from the Israeli perspective, the Iranians will ability to launch strikes, continued strikes against Israel is probably diminishing. And I expect that we will start to see the same over the next week or so in the Gulf.
And Joe, to that point, because Matt alluded to this, there might be, and it's too early to say that there is, but there might be a difference of opinion between the United States and Israel about the tempo of things going forward and what the relative threat probability is. How would you assess that possibility in the next 3 or 4 days?
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I think it really does come down to how you define victory. I think if you're looking at an operation that is aimed at severely degrading the Iranian nuclear program, its nuclear sites, its ballistic missile launch sites, its ballistic missile inventories, its drone manufacturing capabilities, and its Navy, and finally its IRGC, particularly IRGC command and control facilities and personnel, then I think we will be well on the way to wrapping things up. Certainly within a few weeks, as the president indicated. If you're looking really to shape regime change, that, I think, is a much more complex operation that will take more time. And I am not sure that that is where the administration ultimately will go. I think that, as the president said on the first day, he was looking to create the conditions on the ground to enable the Iranian people to take matters into their own hands at some point in time and really emerge and take control of the situation and be masters of their own destiny. And I think that would be the optimal outcome. But that remains to be seen if that is how we're going to define victory.
Indeed, Joe, that's one of the variables still on the table. Joe Zaks, very much appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to bring in CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Brand new CBS polling about how Americans feel about this war. Take it away.
Major, Americans do not feel like they have been given a clear explanation of what the U.S. goals are. 62% say they have not, that they have not been given a clear explanation. What is important about that is this. They don't necessarily think this is going to be a short conflict. Look at this. A lot of people think it might take months. Some people think it might take years, and there are a lot who are not sure. Now, the reason that is important is if you think it's going to be a long conflict, months, even years, look at how the numbers tilt toward disapproval of it overall. One final thing. I asked people, okay, you haven't been given a clear explanation, but what do you think the administration's goals are? There's a lot of them. We got a lot of these answers. Changing Iran's leadership, stopping Iran's military and missile capabilities. All these things that the administration have talked about, right? Preventing Iran from producing nuclear weapons, all of that. But it's that duration that really matters because net, you've got majority disapproval on the action.
When I looked at your numbers, Anthony, I was struck by the partisan breakdown and particularly on the question of approve, disapprove, the independents.
Yeah. Take a look at this. We have seen before in these other military actions in Venezuela, for example, strong support from the Republican base, and we see that again here. Strong support from the Republican base, including MAGA Republicans, I should add, where they have confidence in the president, they think he's making things safer, but the rest of the country, if you will, a lot of independents, feel that he has not. So here's another net-net. Does it make the U.S. more or less safe? Right? Simple bottom line. More say right now, less safe than more.
Anthony Salvanto with the brand new numbers from our CBS polling unit. Thank you very, very much. The 2026 midterm season is upon us, whether we're ready or not. I'm ready. Voters at the polls for primary day in Texas, North Carolina, and Arkansas. Ed O'Keefe joins me now from Austin. He has been following the hotly contested Senate race. Ed, take it away.
Major, good to see you. We are at James Tallarico headquarters in Austin. As you can see, it's a work in progress here. They let us in about 18 minutes ago, and our great crew quickly assembled for you so that we could talk to you about the fact that they've seen record turnout already in early voting. We're still assessing what the turnout has been like so far today. There have been some issues in Dallas and Williamson counties with some confused Democrats on where exactly they were supposed to vote. One of the things Anthony and his polling unit has been doing is assessing what Republicans and Democrats are looking for as this midterm campaign season begins. And one of the findings of those polls among Republicans is that they still expect loyalty to the president. We talked to a handful of Republicans across the state. Listen to two women we spoke with and what they think it means to be a Republican.
Do you think being a Republican requires loyalty to the president?
Well, yes, it requires loyalty to your president if they're Republican, and it requires not being an enemy, really, of anyone, because, you know, it takes compromise and it takes working together to get things done.
What to you does it mean in 2026 to be a Republican?
Being a Republican, it is supporting the MAGA agenda. And MAGA is not necessarily just conservative values. I think it's common sense values that would really apply to any party perspective. I mean, when you put America first, it does mean just that.
So it means total loyalty to the president?
Well, not total loyalty to the president, but certainly his agenda, which is America first.
You ask questions of Democrats, what are they concerned about as this midterm campaign season begins? They're looking for accountability with the Trump administration. They want to check on what's going on at the White House. They're also being driven out to the polls by concerns about immigration policy. Listen to two younger women we met at a UT Dallas rally held by Tallarico late last week.
Immigrants built this country, and James is standing up for our people. You know, he's talking about ICE and that mean masked men, running our streets. And I feel like being here, it's definitely one of my biggest motivators, to have a voice for people who can. It's really important.
Which would include your parents.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know anyone who's been caught up in any of that stuff?
Me personally, I don't want to say too much about
That's
that.
Fair. That's totally understandable. But it affects you.
It does really affect me.
And it's driving your desire to be out here.
100%.
I'm not a fan of ICE, and I just like that he's wanting to fight the billionaires and fighting for the little man.
So economic concerns.
Yes.
And immigration.
Yes.
Sounds like.
Yes.
Has there been study here on campus?
Yes.
Has there been any concern about fellow classmates and ICE at all?
Yes, I have friends that are here, and their parents are immigrants, and they are the most patriotic people that I know. They love America. They love Texas. They love that they're able to fight and be able to be what they are here.
4 of the Texans participating in the kickoff to the 2026 campaign season. Major, as you know, polls will be closed across the Lone Star State by 9 p.m. Eastern tonight. We'll start going over the results then.
Indeed, we will. Ed O'Keefe, thank you very, very much coming to us from Austin. I want to turn now to CBS News election law expert and he's election law expert, David Becker. David, What happened in Texas today? What happened in North Carolina? We love to talk about Election Day as a day to watch the process play out. How's it played out so far?
Yeah, so far it's a great start to the election season, it seems. We are seeing very high early vote turnout. We still have to see what happens on Election Day. As you know, in Texas, most of the turnout occurs on Election Day. North Carolina, still a significant amount of the turnout occurs on Election Day. So we'll see what happens there. Very few problems so far. Ed had mentioned the high turnout. He mentioned there were problems in Dallas County, Texas, where the county Republican Party had demanded a change from what had been traditionally done in Dallas County and in much of Texas, where they had what's called vote centers, where voters can go to any location within the county and get a ballot and cast it. That's what voters in Dallas County and in many counties in the state are used to. But for the first time, they switched back to precinct voting centers where everyone had only one place to go. And that has apparently caused a significant amount of voter confusion throughout the day, again, at the insistence in this case of the county Republican Party.
But overall, a generally smooth process in Arkansas, North Carolina, and Texas, so far as we can tell.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, that's about the only problems I've really heard about. Texas had been transitioning over to a new statewide voter registration database system, and there's always challenges when you change systems like that. They'd been phasing it in over time and working on it, but I have not heard of many problems that resulted from that over the course of the day. That's very good news, and it is very good news also for what we might see come in November.
Exactly, and that's because election workers do the job. David Becker, thank you very much.
Right. Thanks,
Please tune in tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. I will be anchoring special primary night coverage right here on CBS News 24/7. That may or may not be of interest to you, but it's kind of interest to me. You know, I'll be here. Still to come, world oil prices continue to climb and U.S. stock markets remain uneasy. This, after absorbing tariff-related inflation, consumers might find another price shock if the war with Iran drags on. Plus, my visit to North Carolina, where a progressive Democrat, tired of griping about GOP redistricting, switched parties and ran for Congress. We'll tell you about this unusual primary contest. Two Republican senators take DHS Secretary Kristi Noem to task. One over her taxpayer-funded TV ads, the other over aggressive ICE deportation tactics. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to The Takeout. Investors began the day with a sell-off as the war in Iran pushed up oil prices. Then things slightly stabilized. By day's end, the watchword was volatility with a capital V. But it was scary this morning. I mean, at one point, the Dow was down 1,200 points. Closing bell closed about 400. So it all kind of evened out. Well, it didn't even out, but it was not as scary. Kelly O'Grady, break it all down for us. So scary, but the markets don't seem to know how to read this. They don't seem to know how to read how deep the uncertainty well could actually be.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, look, I go back to April of last year. You saw some of these same reactions, big swings when we were dealing with the tariff uncertainty. And obviously, it's a different type of uncertainty, but it's still the same type of how big is this going to be? How impactful is this going to be? Is this going to cause inflation in the economy? Because remember, what investors are really concerned about is this war in Iran brings oil prices up and up and up, and then that flows through the economy, and you might see inflation rise again. And then that means no interest rate cuts. So they're sort of looking at all of these moving puzzle pieces. How long is this going to last? How many countries are going to be involved in this? How big is this? And that's why you see these huge swings. And then the littlest bit of news of, oh, wait, maybe there's going to be some relief, and you have it sort of calm down again. Also, frankly, you had a lot of investors buying the dip, because there are a lot of companies that are going to be fine in the long run, and they said, hey, this is a great buying opportunity.
So talk to the audience about the Strait of Hormuz. The president said the United States is now going to provide military escorts. That's got to calm down the insurers, and it may reassure those who are trying to make sure that transit area remains navigable.
Yeah, so they're not just going to provide, if necessary, naval escorts, but they're also going to provide the opportunity to buy political risk insurance, because this was something that was really problematic at the beginning of the day. We were hearing from a lot of our sources that these marine insurers were saying, we are not going to provide you with this war risk coverage because, of course, you're going to be in a situation where we would probably have to pay out a claim because you have all these missiles targeting these ships. The U.S. is saying, we're going to provide that coverage for you. You're going to have to pay for it. but we're also going to provide that escort. And so I think what this is incentivizing these shipping companies to do is to continue using this waterway. What I'm still concerned about, though, is all of the other countries that are around there. Qatar has stopped its liquefied natural gas operations. Saudi Arabia, their refinery got hit. This gets at the transport of the oil issue. It doesn't get at the production issue.
And that infrastructure is a key variable. There are so many on the map, but that's one of them. Kelly O'Grady, great stuff as always. Thanks so much. A North Carolina progressive lost her 2024 state Senate race by almost 30 points. Now she's running for Congress, but as a Republican. Next right here, my trip to the Tar Heel State. We'll look at why this is all going on. Welcome back to the Takeout. A self-described progressive in North Carolina will be on the ballot today with an R, not a D, next to her name. Why? Because Kate Barr is using her bid for the 14th congressional district to protest gerrymandering. I spoke with her back in 2024 when she ran as a Democrat in a state legislative race. And then, just a few weeks ago, about her most recent campaign, one she knows she's probably not going to win. When we first met Kate Barr in 2024, she was a Democrat.
Do y'all have a plan to vote?
Running an energetic but hopeless campaign for the North Carolina legislature.
I'm running for state senate and I can't win.
Why?
We live in a gerrymandered district. I actually live in a gerrymandered state.
Sure enough, Barr lost by 29 points.
Some people call me a rhino.
Now she's trying something different, switching parties and running in the Republican primary for Congress, specifically North Carolina's 14th district. The last time I met you, you were a Democrat.
Yeah.
What happened?
I'm still progressive. I just have an R next to my name.
The tactics have changed, but her message is the same. Partisan gerrymandering kills political competition and heightens polarization.
The primary is where the actual competition happens. So Kate Barr couldn't win as a Democrat, but Kate Barr can win as a Republican in the Republican primary. Both ideas equally ridiculous.
Barr opposes ICE immigration raids and the Trump tax and trade agenda. If elected, she would almost certainly caucus with House Democrats. Hers, you see, is a more subversive challenge to redistricting mania.
You can look at almost any election that has happened in North Carolina on the statewide level and know that we are a purple state. We should be sending a purple delegation to Washington.
After the 2020 census, the congressional delegation was split 7-7. Then Republicans redrew the map, turning it into a 10-4 advantage. Another redraw last year is expected to add one more GOP seat. Interestingly, North Carolina has elected Democratic governors since 2016, and every presidential vote since 2008 has been decided by fewer than 4 points. Do you think she's a Republican?
No, she's no Republican at all.
Barr's opponent, freshman Congressman Tim Moore, told us Republican primary voters see through Barr's campaign. Moore said he's never met Barr, has no real interest in doing so, and won't debate her.
Someone who is that far left, who is trying to come into a Republican primary to deceive or fool Republican voters, I mean that's fraud at that point. She's at least being honest about being a fraud, if you will.
I am being dead honest. People that vote for me know exactly what they're getting.
The director for Princeton's gerrymandering project, Samuel Wong, joins me now. We should point out he is also running for Congress in New Jersey's 12th congressional district, which he had more than a small role in creating. So, Sam, I want to play something for you because I want my audience to understand. Kate Barr just said North Carolina is a purple state. You might say, well, I'm going to discount her because she's a Democrat that's pretending to be a Republican. But today, my colleague, Torian Small, talked to Michael Whatley, who's the Republican nominee for the Senate in North Carolina. And this is what he said. Michael Whatley, listen.
Well, you know, North Carolina, we're a purple state, right? And we are a state that is 30% Republican, 30% Democrat, 40% unaffiliated. And what that really means is you've got to get out there and you've got to talk and you've got to communicate with every single voter.
So Michael Whatley, Republican running for the United States Senate, agrees with Kate Barr. North Carolina is a purple state. So talk to me about redistricting there, Samuel.
Redistricting in New Jersey, you mean?
North Carolina.
In North Carolina has been ground zero for partisan redistricting. I mean, Democrats several decades ago drew a map that was to their advantage. In the meantime, it's gone back and forth, and it's depended very much on who controls the state Supreme Court. Now that the state Supreme Court is goes to the right, now at that point they're aligned with the legislature. And so there's a map that is the most extreme gerrymander that North Carolina has seen possibly ever.
And what is the practical outcome of that effect of gerrymandering that is that pronounced?
The practical outcome is that when one political party controls redistricting, then it locks in outcomes. There's no competition in either direction. And as a result, voters' wishes don't matter. As a result, we have a map that could be something like 11-3 Republicans to Democrats. And voters are effectively frozen out. Politicians have chosen their voters.
And both parties do this.
Both parties do this. Republicans have been doing it a lot in the last half year. And these days, Democrats have been firing back in places like California.
And for the audience's benefit, it's been unusual this year to see so many states do what we refer to as mid-session or mid-season redistricting, meaning halfway through the census 10-year period, they're jumping back into this map redrawing.
That's right. In the last 50 years, there have been only 3 instances of mid-decade redistricting. And just in the last 6 months alone, we've had 6 more instances. And so this is really unprecedented in the history of modern voting rights. It's really quite incredible and unseemly.
And talk to my audience about your particular granular experience with this in New Jersey.
Well, I was the neutral expert in redistricting, and so I was in some sense the referee working on working for the tiebreaker, who is the chair of the commission. And we were behind closed doors, and Democrats presented their plan, Republicans presented their plan. And I was sitting there basically applying neutral standards to try to figure out which plan was better or less bad, depending on how you look at it.
And you came up with something that was then challenged. Some allegations were hurled at you. There was an investigation, and you were cleared, as I recall.
That is true. I was cleared of those. I think what didn't really come out in the public coverage of it was that the people who drew the lines were the Democrats and the Republicans. And behind closed doors, my job was to give neutral scores and to do my very best job to be a referee. And it was the judge's call, the tiebreaker, and he chose one plan. So it came out in public in a very strange way. I think it just goes to show that redistricting really is a blood sport.
Samuel Wong. I'm going to give you the last word. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Jasmine Crockett versus James Tallarico, the Texas Democratic Senate primary. 2 progressive candidates and long shot hopes of a November upset. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. Joining me now, CBS News political contributor Chuck Rocha. And we should note his consulting firm, Solidarity Strategies, advising Democratic Senate candidate in Texas, James Tallarico. So, Chuck, I know you know the answer to this question. I probably also know you don't want to talk about it. How can Jasmine Crockett win tonight?
She has to gin up base voters who normally don't vote in a Democratic primary. There's 2 theories of the case here, and I'm not saying that Jasmine's is wrong. I'll remind folks that Donald Trump won his race by jazzing up his primary. So it's not a flawed system. The problem Jasmine has is that she got in and filed on the last date. So her biggest opponent has not been James Tallarico. It's been the clock. So in a Democratic primary, mainly only Democratic primary voters vote. But stay tuned. Something different has happened in Texas during the early vote in person. 30% of the electorate that showed up in the primary had no Democratic primary vote history. That comes from 2 major groups. The biggest one being general election voters who were so angry at what they're seeing decided to show up in a primary. We don't know who those folks voted for. Congresswoman Crockett or Tallarico, and also folks who had a Republican voting history. Almost 12% of the Democratic primary voters, get this, in person, already voted, have some history of voting in a Republican primary. These 2 things are very unusual in a primary.
What have you seen, if anything, about day of turnout today?
It's up. It's up everywhere. And what I was telling people, Major, is that so many people had voted early. Historically, for all of you at home, more people voted early in the Democratic primary than had voted total in all the primary in 2018 or in 2022. And we're continuing to see that surge right now all across the state of Texas, when I thought maybe we had cannibalized some of that early vote and some of those folks who vote on Election Day showing up to vote early. But no, the rate continues. Voter turnout is up in Houston, in Austin. I know they're going through some snafus in Dallas County, but also Bexar County. It's up everywhere.
And Chuck, what does that tell you, or what does it suggest to you about November, whoever emerges from this Democratic Senate primary?
Major, me and you've talked about this many, many times on air, which is a midterm is a different election than a presidential. It's about motivation because normally 35% of the electorate from the presidential year don't show up in an off-year election. So it's about motivating the base vote, Democrat or Republican. It's the same scenario to get them to show up. What Texas has proven right now is Democrats are fired up. And to be fair to Republicans, because that's what I do, is their voter turnout is up as well, but only about a quarter, while ours is up almost 1,000% in certain counties. So you see motivation on both sides because Republicans have a primary as well. It's just dramatically more on the Democratic side.
What is the wind at James Tallarico's back?
He has something that's very unique, Major. Me and you have covered a lot of politicians. I got to been about Ruben Gallego and Bernie Sanders, and everybody has their own thing. I was at a rally in San Antonio with James on Sunday, and the room was packed door to door. And a Democrat on stage quoting Bible verses, talking about we've got to look to our neighbors. We should love Jesus and our neighbor. We should welcome the immigrant, and we should fight like hell for working people. I think that's a message Democrats could use to win a lot of elections in November.
Chuck, 30 seconds. How big has immigration played in possibly retilting what we saw in Texas in 2024 to Trump?
There's a whole lot of Latinos in this state that voted Republican in the elections that you're talking about. And they were all for deporting dangerous criminals. What they were not for is deporting their grandmother or their cousin who'd been here for 30 years and not broke a law. It's going to be a big issue in November. And when ICE agents started killing American citizens on the street of Minnesota, it was a step too far. That's why you're going to see a dramatic change back to Democrats by a lot of Latinos, especially in Texas.
Chuck Rocha, always appreciate your time, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank
Hillary
you.
Clinton fighting back, the fiery Epstein investigation deposition, and why the former Secretary of State walked out at one point. You're going to see it and hear it when we come back. You're watching The Takeout. Welcome back. Political panel time. I want to bring in Deputy Communications Director for the DNC, Hannah Moldavid, and Republican strategist Matt Gorman. Look, we're going to focus on things not related to the war with Iran because there are other things happening in politics right now. Let's start with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, appeared before a Senate panel today and got some interesting questions. One from John Kennedy, Republican from Louisiana, about money spent for advertisements that feature the DHS Secretary somewhat prominently. Let's listen.
One thing, Senator, I think would be helpful to know is how effective that communications has been. That
well, they
overwhelmingly
were effective in your name recognition. I'm not saying you're not telling the truth. It's just hard for me to believe, knowing the president, as I do, that you said, Mr. President, here's some ads I've cut, and I'm going to spend $220 million running them, that he would have agreed to that.
Underscore the part where Senator Kennedy says your name recognition boosted. Also, Tom Tillis, Republican senator from North Carolina, not seeking re-election, on another topic, enforcement through ICE. Listen.
And what we've seen is a disaster. Under your leadership, Ms. Noem, a disaster. What we've seen is innocent people getting detained that turn out are American citizens. I could talk about the culture that's been created here with Stephen Miller aiding and abetting. And if I don't get an answer to these questions, I don't want an applause. Please don't do that for me. If I don't get an answer to these questions, if I don't get an answer that you've had a month to respond to, and the remaining ones, as of today, I'll be informing leadership that I'm putting a hold on any en bloc nominations until I get a response. And in 2 weeks, if I don't get a response, I'm going to deny quorum and markup in as many committees as I can until I get a response.
What I find interesting about this, Matt, I want to have you to start on this, is for a cabinet secretary of this administration to come before a Senate panel and get some heat from Republicans is pretty unusual. But Kristi Noem got it today.
Yeah, look, Tom Tillis isn't surprising, right? He's retiring for a reason. But you're right, the Kennedy stuff was surprising. He's not somebody that's thought of as a moderate. He's not somebody a squish or a frequent critic of the administration. So that was something, as I had read later reports, that issue was troubling him a little bit. I'd be curious if that actually stays something that he talks about in the days to come. Now, the Tillis thing is interesting because it also plays into how Trump deals with people that are either retiring or he wants to endorse again. So I know that it played into him endorsing Julia Letlow, but also when he did it, because if he endorses against a sitting senator like Bill Cassidy, does that let Cassidy go off the reservation a little bit? So I think much like Tillis did. So that's something they're factoring in right now as well.
Hannah, your thoughts?
This is a secretary who has overseen the department during a time when Americans witnessed the murder of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. And so it's interesting to see that these Republican senators are standing up saying it was a disaster, your overseeing of this. You know, I think it's also interesting to point out that Donald Trump really was high on immigration when he came into office. It's one of the reasons that he won, right? ICE is now completely underwater. Americans want reforms too. The ICE and federal agency that Noem is overseeing, and I think we see these Republicans step up because they know that Americans don't like what they're seeing and that Noem needs to go.
Matt, to that point that Hannah just raised, do you think that this criticism from these two Senate Republicans is indicative of anything that is suggesting Republicans might be wanting the administration to give a little bit in terms of ICE reforms in order to get DHS funding secured for the rest of this fiscal year?
Here's what I keep coming back to. I think it was a strategic, a win for John Thune to the Democrats agree to a 2-week stopgap about a month and a half ago. And I can't figure out why Democrats agreed to it, candidly. Again, you know, when Alex Preddy was shot, this issue was red hot. It was a national issue in a way that many issues here in Washington break through among normal voters in a way that it doesn't. And by taking it off the table for 2 weeks, again, DHS has been shut down for, 2.5 weeks now? We're really not talking about it. And there's been no real progress on any part. If they had actually held firm when that actually happened, maybe it's in a different place right now. I think there was a fundamental mistake on Schumer's part. And I think it's led down to the fact that this is all happening in the background. And it might come up on hearings, but it's in no way setting the terms of the debate.
Got it. One other thing was announced. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick is going to appear voluntarily before the House Oversight Committee. Last week, it conducted a deposition with Hillary Clinton, and there was a moment in that deposition that got a little hot. Let's watch it.
I'm done with this. If you guys are doing that, I am done. You can hold me in contempt from now until the cows come home. This is just typical behavior.
We will go off the record.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So I would like to understand how that's permissible.
Before the hearing was. It doesn't matter. We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah,
So
well.
I would like to take a break at this moment.
Yeah,
I'd like to have
I'm
a
done
conversation.
for now.
That was about a picture posted by Lauren Boebert, Republican from Colorado, of the deposition before it started. You could see Secretary Clinton deeply displeased about that. Hannah?
You can tell by these actions from Lauren Boebert that this is all a political stunt for these Republicans on the Oversight Committee. We want transparency when it comes to the Epstein files. Democrats have been behind that. Democrats on the committee called for it. The Clintons showed up to their depositions. I think it's time for us to start looking at the Republican Party. We've seen there are a list of names of people that are in the cabinet for Donald Trump whose names have appeared in the Epstein files. Jamie Raskin said that Donald Trump's name appeared over 1 million times in the Epstein files. We need Republicans and the Trump DOJ to follow the law, release all of the Epstein files, and let's shine light on what this horrible man did and bring justice to the victims. Republicans have been doubtful and not coming forward with that.
And to reiterate, Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary, will voluntarily appear before the House Oversight Committee on this matter. Hannah Moldavan, Matt Gorman, thank you very much. Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is The Takeout coming to you from New York, where we remain relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report, coming your way next.